What if the answer to today's food crisis wasn't in some Silicon Valley lab, but was hidden in an 80-year-old government document that everyone just stopped talking about? During World War II, a plan was put into action that saw 20 million victory gardens spring up across the country. These weren't just a few pots on a windowsill. This was a nationwide movement. From backyards and city parks, ordinary citizens grew a staggering 40% of the nation's fresh vegetables. This knowledge was a lifeline that built a nation that could feed itself, even in the darkest of times. But after the war, this blueprint wasn't just filed away, it was quietly forgotten. Not because it stopped working, but because it worked too well. It was pushed aside for a multi-billion-dollar industrial food system that needed dependent customers, not self-sufficient citizens. Today, we're digging it up.
Every trip to the grocery store feels a bit like a gamble, doesn't it? Prices are soaring, some shelves are weirdly empty, and the food you can get is often coated in chemicals and shipped from thousands of miles away. We've become dependent on a fragile, complicated system that is clearly showing its cracks. We feel powerless, and that's part of the design. But a previous generation faced far greater uncertainty: global war, total rationing, and shattered supply lines, and they didn't feel powerless. They were handed a set of principles, a secret weapon disguised as a garden hoe. They were taught how to create abundance from scarcity, turning their own homes into fortresses of food security. These weren't just cute gardening tips, they were a revolutionary act of resilience. These are the forgotten principles of the victory garden, and they're more critical today than ever. We're about to revive 7 of these lost principles to show you how you can find a little more food freedom right from your own home.
The first principle: maximize productivity, not just size. The first mistake most of us make is thinking we need a huge plot of land. The victory garden philosophy wasn't about having the biggest garden, it was about having the most productive one. They knew a critical secret: a small, intensely managed space can easily outproduce a large, neglected one. Forget those sprawling rows with wide, wasteful paths between them. The historical blueprint prioritized layouts that dedicated almost all the space to growing. The modern version of this is the 4-foot-wide raised bed, and it's a game changer. Why 4 feet? Because it's the maximum width you can comfortably reach into from both sides without ever stepping on and compacting that precious soil. This deep, loose soil allows roots to grow down, not out, letting you space plants closer together and potentially tripling your yield per square foot. While many victory gardens were large, the principles were so effective they could be scaled down. Plots as small as 100 square feet were able to significantly supplement a family's diet. Balconies became vertical farms with trellised beans, and sunny front yards, once reserved for useless lawns, became productive assets. The principle is simple: every square inch has to justify its existence. It's not about acreage, it's about intensity. Stop thinking about how much land you have and start thinking about how much food you can grow in every single square foot.
The second principle is to prioritize crops based on calories, storage, and utility. You have to grow what will actually sustain you. The backbone of the victory garden was the humble potato. Why? Caloric density. For the same amount of space, potatoes produce far more calories than many other vegetables. Planting just a handful of potato plants could provide a meaningful boost to a family's food supply. Following potatoes were other high-calorie staples: winter squash, beans, corn, and sweet potatoes. These were the workhorses you could store and eat when other foods were scarce. They grew what they needed, not just what they wanted. That doesn't mean you can't grow your family's favorite tomatoes. The modern twist here is to look at your grocery bill, see what you spend the most on, and start there.
But the core lesson remains. Dedicate the majority of your space to high-yield, high-calorie, and high-utility crops. A garden full of decorative lettuce is pretty, but a garden with potatoes, beans, and squash is a fortress against hunger.
The third principle: your soil is your bank account. The industrial food system wants you to think soil is just dead dirt, something to hold a plant up while you douse it with chemical fertilizers. The WW2 generation knew the truth. The soil is a living, breathing ecosystem, and it's the most valuable asset you have. Building it was practically a sacred duty. They didn't have bags of synthetic fertilizer. They built their own. One of their most powerful techniques is something we now call chop and drop. When a plant was done producing, they didn't yank it out and throw it away. They simply cut it at the base and let the leaves and stems fall right where they grew. This created a natural mulch that protected the soil, smothered weeds, and fed the trillions of microbes within. Bagging your yard waste is like throwing away free money. They also understood the power of compost. Every kitchen scrap, every fallen leaf, every blade of grass was a resource to be returned to the soil. Some even used a technique that sounds radical today. They'd inoculate new garden beds with a few handfuls of rich, living soil from a healthy forest to introduce a thriving web of beneficial fungi and bacteria. They were building a self-fertilizing system. You have to treat your soil like a bank account. Always make more deposits than withdrawals.
The fourth principle: plant in relays, not just once. A common mistake is the all-at-once garden. We plant everything in spring, get a massive harvest in late summer, and then leave the garden empty for the other 9 months of the year. This is a huge waste of potential. The fourth principle is to think of your garden like a factory that never closes, using a technique called succession planting. Bare soil was the enemy. As soon as one crop was harvested, another was planted in its place. A row of spring peas would be followed by summer peppers, which might then be followed by fall kale. They planted a few radishes every 2 weeks to ensure a continuous, manageable harvest, instead of one giant glut you couldn't possibly eat. This staggering of planting and harvesting could easily double or even triple a garden's output without adding a single square foot of space. This creates a constant flow of fresh food, so you're harvesting something every week, not just once a season. It also builds resilience. If a pest or disease wipes out one planting, the next relay is already on its way. Your garden's most valuable resource isn't water or fertilizer, it's time. Don't let a single week of the growing season go to waste. If you're tired of being dependent on a broken system and want to learn more of these forgotten skills for self-sufficiency, make sure you subscribe. We're dedicated to uncovering the lost wisdom that gives you real power and control over your own life. Go ahead and click that subscribe button.
The fifth principle: design for your location. There is no one-size-fits-all blueprint for a garden. The original Victory Garden pamphlets always stressed a critical fifth principle. You have to adapt to your specific conditions. That means knowing your climate, your soil, and your personal space. Before you plant a single seed, study your land. Where does the sun hit for at least 6 hours a day? Where is the best protection from the wind? Today, we can easily find our USDA hardiness zone to pick plant varieties that will thrive, not just survive, in our specific area. The genius of the movement was its scalability. A farmer with a quarter-acre plot in the countryside might use long, traditional rows. A suburban family would use the intensive raised bed method we talked about, and a city dweller could use containers on a patio or build vertical trellises on a balcony to grow beans and cucumbers in a tiny footprint. The key is to be honest about your situation. Don't try to copy a farm plan on a city balcony. Work with what you have. This flexibility is what allowed 20 million different gardens to flourish in 20 million unique locations.
The sixth principle is to integrate nature's workforce. Our modern approach to pests is to declare war. We spray chemicals to kill the bad bugs, and then wonder why our plants aren't producing any fruit. The sixth principle of the Victory Garden was to work with nature, not against it, by recruiting a willing and effective workforce of pollinators and beneficial insects. They knew a sterile garden of only vegetables was a weak garden, so they intentionally planted flowers like marigolds and borage right in among the vegetables. This wasn't just to make things look pretty. These flowers attracted the bees and other pollinators that are absolutely essential for crops like squash, cucumbers, and tomatoes. No pollination, no food. It's that simple. For pests, they used a multi-layered defense. Crop rotation was key. By moving plant families to different beds each year, they broke the life cycle of pests and diseases in the soil. Strong-smelling herbs were planted nearby to confuse and repel pests, and those flowers they planted for pollinators also attracted predatory insects like ladybugs that would feast on aphids. It was a complete living ecosystem designed to defend itself, a huge contrast to our modern monocrops that require constant chemical intervention.
The seventh principle is plan for the full year. The final crucial principle is that the garden didn't end when the first frost arrived. True self-sufficiency means planning to feed yourself for the entire year, not just the summer. This meant mastering season extension and food preservation. To extend the harvest, they used simple, low-tech structures called cold frames. These were basically just wooden boxes with an old glass window for a lid, but they acted as miniature greenhouses. They trapped solar heat and allowed families to harvest tough greens like spinach and kale deep into the winter. Even more critical was preserving those calorie-dense staples. They canned hundreds of jars of fruits and vegetables, but for root crops, they used an ingenious zero-energy method called a vegetable clamp or root cellar. They would dig a shallow pit in a well-drained spot, line it with straw, and carefully pile in their potatoes, carrots, and beets. The whole mound was then covered with more straw and a thick layer of soil. This underground pantry used the earth's natural insulation to keep the vegetables fresh all winter long after the grocery store shelves might have been empty.
So there you have it. Maximize your productivity, prioritize calories, build your soil, plant in relays, design for your location, work with nature, and plan for the whole year. This is the blueprint that was pushed aside. It's a blueprint that replaces dependence with independence, scarcity with abundance, and helplessness with real power. The Victory Garden was more than a response to a crisis. It was a declaration that ordinary people with the right knowledge can provide for themselves. They proved that our food security doesn't have to come from a factory farm 1,000 miles away. It can come from our own two hands and from the soil right under our feet. This knowledge is your birthright. It's time to reclaim it. It's time to stop just buying your food and start growing your freedom.